Since the inauguration on January 20th, 2025, a formidable opponent has risen to tell it like it is, to call out Donald Trump, his ineptitude, his horrific policies, and the authoritarianism and fascism of his regime. And one of the people is somebody you know, Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, but it's actually his entire family that has been going head to head against Donald and his cronies. And this is personal and long standing. The Pritzker family and Donald have been going at it for over 30 years, while the current battle focuses on Penny Pritzker and Governor Pritzker. The feud runs very deep. It's actually gone on for a couple of generations now. Back in 1993, Donald sued the Pritzker family, claiming that they took advantage of him during his financial collapse. Let me repeat this. They took advantage of him during his financial collapse. What exactly is he talking about? Well, the 6 bankruptcies he had to file because he's the only moron who's ever lived who doesn't understand how to make money from owning casinos. So let's go back a little bit. In the 1970s, Jay Pritzker, who I believe is J.B. Pritzker's uncle, was head of the Hyatt Empire, and he partnered with Donald to rebrand a failing New York hotel, the old Commodore Hotel, which became known as the Grand Hyatt. This was Donald's first major deal, but that's actually overstating it because none of this would have happened without my grandfather's vast wealth, power, and political connections in New York City. So Donald was the face of the project, but really the clout behind it was my grandfather. The partnership went south partially because Donald didn't know what he was doing, but took credit for everything anyway. And over 10 years later, he sued the Pritzkers for $500 million, claiming that at the time, Hyatt had used questionable accounting and unauthorized payments in order to enrich the Pritzkers at Donald's expense, also alleging that one goal of those improper practices was to force Donald out of the partnership. Who wouldn't want to force him out of a partnership, actually, because he didn't bring anything to it? After he filed the lawsuit, Donald said, quote, "The Pritzkers attacked me when I was down. Now I'm doing great again, and it's my turn. I always said the first time I got back on my feet, the Pritzkers would be the first people I'd go after," unquote. Wow, that's a brilliant use of your time. And when he says that he's doing great again, what he means is that for the billionth time, my grandfather used his enormous wealth, and the banks kept throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at Donald to keep him afloat so that he could continue to pretend that he represented luxury. I'm not kidding. At around this time, the banks were giving Donald an allowance of $450,000 a month just so he could make his mortgage payments. That's how great he was doing. So now that Pritzker, JB, is the governor of a sanctuary state, and the fascist Trump regime is hell-bent on going after immigrants, the old feud has become a full-scale political battle. But, unlike Donald, the Pritzkers are prepared. Before we go on, just remember, though, that we are not corporate media, we do not bend the knee, and we are not for sale. We continue to expose the lies the Trump regime tells every day and wants to keep buried. Independent media survives because of you. So please like and share our videos, and please subscribe to our channel. All right, so let's start with the Pritzker, who is now the face of the fight for higher education. That would be Penny Pritzker. She is a Harvard alumna, and in 2022, she became the head of the Harvard Corporation. That's the board that oversees the operations of the university that has a $54 billion endowment. She's also a former Democratic cabinet official and one of the wealthiest women in the world. So, of course, Donald is trying to take her down because her uncle was mean to him once. Enter Linda McMahon, a not very bright woman who, sadly for us, is the secretary of the Department of Education and who used to be in charge of the WWE. So she has joined Donald's anti-Harvard crusade, and she joined it in a very weird way. She sent a bizarre, barely literate letter announcing that Harvard's federal grants were being cut off for alleged legal violations, which makes as little sense as her letter did. She wrote this letter in response to a MAGA billionaire Bill Ackman's calling for Penny Pritzker's resignation from the Harvard Corporation. The justification here? Well, quote, any serious corporation would have removed her after a litany of recent failings, unquote. Well, I guess Linda McMahon and Donald Trump would know better than anybody else about failings, but here's the thing. The letter itself is a joke. As I said, it's barely literate, and it makes a complete hash of the English language. So it's a bit surprising that anybody could make any sense of it at all. Of course, this is a perfect symbol of what the Trump regime stands for. They want to get rid of the Department of Education. They want to get rid of public education entirely. What better way to do it than to put in charge of the Department of Education a woman who can barely read above a second grade reading level? Harvard, of course, is not buying any of this, and in response, they doubled down on their support for Penny Pritzker, writing, quote, we applaud Pritzker's dedicated stewardship and her leadership at a time when Harvard is committed both to strengthening our campus culture and protecting the academic freedom, research, and innovation that benefits millions of Americans, unquote. It's rare these days to see an institution stand strong in the face of authoritarian pressure, but Penny Pritzker made it clear. Just like Harvard, she's not backing down either. Now, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, has been one of the most vocal and effective opponents of the Trump regime. He spent years in his state shoring up reproductive rights, fighting for immigrant protections, and going head to head with MAGA operatives on the ground in Illinois.
It's time to fight everywhere and all at once.
In a rousing 30-minute speech, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker scolded Democrats like Rahm Emanuel and Gavin Newsom for recent media appearances where they suggested tempering the party's positions on cultural issues.
And now that this culture of timidity is on full display, those same do-nothing Democrats want to blame our losses on our defense of black people, of trans kids, of immigrants, instead of their own lack of guts and gumption.
That's how you do it. Recently, Pritzker said, quote, bending to the whims of a bully will not end his cruelty. It will only embolden him, unquote. Yes, we live that truth every day, don't we? JB is not just talking, however. When Department of Homeland Secretary and cosplayer Kristi Gnome tried to stage a press conference in front of the Illinois governor's mansion in order to spout her anti-immigrant lies and hatred, he shut her down.
Governor Pritzker did a little trolling of the Homeland Security chief of his own, saying in a release last night, quote, note, we would urge all pet owners in the region to make sure all of your beloved animals are under watchful protection while the secretary is in the region, end quote. Ouch. Now, he followed that up today with, quote, Trump known publicity stunts do not make our communities safer or our immigration system smarter. Illinois doesn't need to abuse power or ignore the Constitution to keep our people safe.
Now, Pritzker's no-holds-barred approach and his fiery rhetoric is actually inspiring other people to show up. There were protesters. There were signs. Gnome was so outnumbered and so reviled that she was forced to flee to move her press conference elsewhere. For her, it was a public humiliation. For the rest of us, it was a sign of what needs to be done in order to put these monsters in their place. Just days later, J.B. Pritzker turns his attention to Robert Kennedy's despicable plan to create an autism database. Eyewitness News WTVO has more.
Governor Pritzker has become the first governor in the nation to sign an executive order protecting autism data. The move's in response to Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy's efforts to launch a massive testing and research effort to determine the cause of autism. Pritzker's office says it's concerned that the Trump administration will create federal autism registries or databases without legal safeguards or accountability. Pritzker's order restricts the collection or sharing of autism-related data.
This order extends even to vendors and contractors. Data must be anonymized, minimized, and protected by strict privacy protocols. So it's very clear that Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois understands the mission. He understands how to speak to people about what is going on in this country, about what the Trump regime is trying to accomplish here. He understands that what is at stake is our entire future and how we as Americans are treated as individuals, as human beings, as citizens, and whether or not, and the degree to which we even have rights anymore. So, Democrats in power, Democrats with political clout, pay attention to what J.B. Pritzker is doing, because that is how we need every single Democrat in Congress and throughout this country to be acting and speaking. Please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.